Okay. Good evening, everyone. I've got 7:03, so appreciate everyone joining us tonight. We'll go ahead and get started. Be respectful of your time for taking your time out on this evening. It's a balmy evening compared to what we've been through, so appreciate everyone joining us for the Wingate Avenue Traffic Calming meeting. My name is Jeff Hammond. I'm a consultant working on behalf of NDOT, the Nashville Department of Transportation. Jordan Lipsey's also on the call. He's on our team as well, and we are engaged by Metro to administer portions of the traffic calming program. And so one of our roles is to conduct these meetings and develop the design plans for these projects. A couple of housekeeping things. I am recording this meeting. You may have seen that little message just pop up for you. So the purpose of that is to allow anyone who may not have been able to be here tonight, if you have a neighbor or someone who might be interested in the project, wasn't able to join us. These recordings are made available on Metro's YouTube webpage, and so that should be up. Today's Monday, I would say probably Thursday or Friday of this week, certainly by first part of next week. This recording will be available to you. Another housekeeping item is you all should have the ability to unmute yourself if you have any comments or questions, anything that needs clarity, etc. As we go through this. Feel free to unmute yourself and voice that. You can also use the chat. I do keep my little chat open here. If you'd rather just type that, that's fine too. But we try to make this as informal as possible, given the virtual setting here, and make sure your questions get answered tonight. Otherwise, if you would just keep your in muted, that usually works a little bit better. If you have any technical difficulties, if I freeze up, if my slides don't move, something like that, please let me know. I'm not always aware of that. Feel free to put that in the chat or by voice, either way. I think that's it. Three things I want to cover tonight. Basically, how we run these meetings is the first thing, I'll give you a little bit of an overview of traffic calming program and how Wingate got inducted into it. Secondly, we'll look at some of the tools that we have available in the program. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, I want to take a look at the preliminary thoughts we have about what a traffic calming project on Wingate might look like, and we'd like to get your reactions to that. So without further ado, we will get started. A little bit about the traffic calming program. What we really focus on is residential streets as opposed to commercial areas, industrial areas, and so forth. And the reason there's probably pretty self-explanatory. This becomes a real quality of life issue for many residents. Trying to live on the street, speed can have a real detrimental effect on that. And so in addition to safety, we're really trying to focus on those things that really hit home when it comes to a quality of life issue for you. We do focus on physical solutions. I'll talk about some of the other tools that we have aside from that, but by physical solutions, we mean things that we put in the street that you either have to drive over or drive around. We have found that nothing slows traffic down quite as effectively as some of those tools that we have. And lastly, we do focus on speed reduction, and that probably seems obvious, but sometimes people engage the program and say, I wish we could just move some of this traffic off of our street and put it somewhere else. And that's not our objective. That might or might not be a byproduct. It's certainly not something we're trying to achieve. We just want traffic to slow down and drive on your street more responsibly. We know that this is not done in a vacuum. There's some other very important partners that we have in the world of education. NDOT is one of those, and other offices within NDOT, putting together some public service announcements and those types of things, trying to reinforce this message that slow streets are really important for safety and quality of life. And so that education component can be very helpful. Enforcement's another big one, and one that people probably are left a little bit wanting in, that people would say, if we could just park a police cruiser down there and have them write a few tickets, that would really help. And I don't disagree with that. But as we all know, MNPD is pretty stressed and is doing a lot of very important work, and sometimes they just don't have the resources to do a lot of traffic enforcement dedicated towards that, especially on some of these smaller streets like Wingate, very local streets. So that's where we come in the engineering part. The right of way is the jurisdiction of NDOT for many streets, the more local streets for sure. And so all things right of way is what NDOT engages in. So they do maintenance, paving, safety type of improvements, big capital improvements, sidewalk construction, all of that falls under NDOT. And this is one very small subset of that, the traffic calming program. One of the reasons we know people engage the program, because we hear this almost every meeting, is that um, safety is a huge component of their street, and particularly people who are not driving on the street. So if you try to get out and walk in the evenings on Wingate, you may feel safe doing that. Sometimes parts of the day, certainly, I'm sure you do. Other parts, you think, boy, there's just a lot of traffic out here, and it's just moving too fast for me to feel very comfortable. And we know that that has real world implications in the unfortunate event, if there ever is a pedestrian versus car crash. We know from statistically speaking, the survivability of those incidents goes way, way up if traffic is moving at a slower speed. And so that's just one reason. There's many other reasons why Metro and the city and NDOT is very engaged in traffic calming. And this is just a kind of reminder, as national trends and trends here in Nashville continue to tick up towards particularly pedestrian safety. It's a good reminder that safe speeds really goes a long way towards overall a safe environment. And that may be one reason that this program is in such demand. It is an incredibly popular program. I'm not saying that's a good thing. It's kind of a bad thing because there's so much perceived need for it. But in the cohort where you were selected, where this street was selected back in the summer, we had over 500 applications. That's a rolling number. We don't get that many every time, but over the past few selection windows, we're up to over 500 now of streets just like yours, people all over the county who have requested this service, requested that the city come in and do something about the speeding issues there on their street. And so we are tackling that at about a rate of about 50 neighborhoods per year. This past time, there was some additional surplus budget that council saw fit to allocate towards additional traffic calming projects. And so we bumped that up a little bit for this one year. And so a few more neighborhoods got inducted into the program that way. Council is a great supporter of the program, I think, because they hear it from neighbors that say, this is something that's really needed in our city. And by the way, Ms. Welch couldn't be here tonight. They, because of the weather, she let me know that they had juggled the council schedule, and so she's actually having council meetings tonight, committee meetings tonight, and doing official business. Otherwise, I'm sure she would be with us and joining us tonight. She's a great friend of the program. Hub Nashville is another tool that we like to promote at this point, because sometimes people, I'm going to show you the tools that we do have, but there's a lot of things that fall outside of this program that we just don't have access to. Things like stop signs, things like sidewalks. Some of these things kind of go hand in hand with traffic calming. I don't disagree with that, but they're just under different programs. They're funded differently. They're prioritized differently. But all of those things are really important too, and we like to make sure that you know where to go if you do have those types of requests, and many other for that matter. Not just in the world of transportation, but most other metro departments are represented here as well. And that's hub.nashville.com if you're not familiar with it. Hub.Nashville.gov. You can also pick up the phone and call 311. It's just a big clearinghouse and a great way to log those requests. So it's kind of a formal way to do that. They also get those requests to the right department, to the right personnel who can act on those. feel free to take advantage of that. It's a great service for those of us in Davidson County. A little bit about specifically how Wingate and any project gets selected to move forward into this process. And by the way, Wingate is in the process now. There's not a question of funding. We're here to work with you as partners. We'll talk about the neighborhood's role in this. Very much a neighborhood-driven program, but you're in at this point, and so but this is kind of background information to tell you how you got selected. As I mentioned, there's a whole bunch of applications that come in. So of all of those 500 requests that we get for traffic calming, we have to narrow that down to figure out which ones we're going to move forward with a project on. And this is how we do it. 70% of the score that we give each project comes from data that you probably figure it comes from. A big chunk of that is how much traffic is on the street, the traffic volume. And the other part of that 70%, 25% of that is, 25% is the volume, and the rest of that is the actual speed that is measured on the street. The other 30% is a combination of some of those non-driving considerations. So do you have sidewalks on the street? Do you have bike lanes on the street? Is there transit service nearby? Are there other destinations that may make sense to make a walking trip, like parks, like schools, those types of things? All of that rolls into the score, as does the fact that there is or is not a documented pedestrian crash on the street. So all of those things make up the other 30% of the score. So for instance, in Wingate's example, you don't have sidewalks. That helps boost your score up. Streets that do have sidewalks, their score actually goes down with the philosophy that, well, traffic may be fast, but at least people have a place to walk. In streets like yours, you don't have that. So anyway, all of that rolls into the score, and unfortunately, I guess, you were near the top of that and got selected for the project. Fortunately, we do have the program. We're able to try and help address that. So, a little bit of that data specific to Wingate is shown here. It's not the fastest street we've seen, for sure. The 85th percentile speed is kind of a statistical way that engineers look at this. And the way I like to think about it is what this says. It's 15% of the traffic on the street is going faster than 30 miles an hour. Sometimes that number is a little higher than that. You know, many times we're dealing with traffic calming on streets where the 85th percentile speed is 37 or 39, and in a few cases it's been over 40 miles an hour. But nonetheless, for a 25 mile an hour posted speed, it's still a little fast. The traffic volume at about 1,400 cars a day is probably about middle of the road in terms of what we do traffic calming projects on. People often see that volume on their street and you think, my goodness, that's a lot of traffic. And it is, but that's certainly not a number that surprises us. We will do traffic calming in the traditional sense up to about 5,000 cars a day. Any more than that, that becomes, you know, a road like Thompson Lane or Antioch Pike, even on either side of this project, and more major streets. We don't do the traditional types of traffic calming on that. The street width becomes important to us as we start to lay out a design for the project. It's about 22 feet. It may be a foot different here or there, but that's about what it is. And I think you've got you know, pretty defined shoulders. Some of them drop off pretty good on either side, and so anyway, it's a pretty confined road. Again, that's a pretty standard width, nothing unusual there. That's two 11-foot lanes, and it's probably about as average as a street cross section as you get for Davidson County. And then the length of this project is about 0.6 of a mile. And you can see it here, and I know this the labels on this map are pretty small, but let me try to explain it to you. And by the way, this is an interactive map. This is a screenshot from that. But at the end of the presentation, I'll give you the website, if you don't know it already, to the Metro Traffic Calming webpage. And one of the resources there is this map. We call it the Traffic Calming Tracker, and it lets you go pan all over the county and look for different projects and the status of those. And so let me define that for you. Wingate is the north-south street running up and down on your screen, right in the middle of the screen. You can see that little jog maybe right in the middle of it there at Morton Avenue. We are going from Thompson Lane down to Antioch Pike, the entire length of the street, and it's green. And the reason it's green and the reason the other lines that you may see on there are green is because you have a traffic calming program that is in the works. It's somewhere in development. The little street running east-west up on the kind of the upper left-hand part of the screen is Collier Avenue, which I'm sure you're familiar with. That is a project that's a couple of cohorts in front of yours. It hasn't been installed yet, I don't think, but the design plans have been done on that. The balloting, the voting is done on that. That one's just waiting to get installed. It's just waiting its turn in line. You see Harlan Drive over there on the very far left-hand side of the screen and several others. All of those just indicate there's a traffic calming project somewhere in the works. The blue line that you see like on Louise and Patterson there over on the left-hand side indicates that a traffic calming project has been installed. And the reason we like to show those is that if you're not familiar, and more people are familiar with the speed cushions and some of the tools that we use, if you're not, that gives you some direction on where you can go and see those and drive on them, see what you think about them. So we like to have that available to you. And then the other color here, the pink or the purple, those are streets that have applied for a traffic calming project but have not yet been elected based on that prioritization score we were just talking about. So there's a number of other streets in your area that have requested traffic calming, but those have not been selected. We're not moving forward currently with a project on those. So the green and the blue are projects that that are either have been done or will be moving forward in the process. All right, that's good for the background of the program, and we'll be glad to answer any questions if you think of them and want to discuss that more. But we'll move on now to some of the program, the tools that we have available to us in the program. And we start with this one, and this is really the bread and butter. And when people think of, Metro's traffic calming program, they're probably thinking of speed cushions at this point because we do these on the vast majority, probably 97–98% of the projects are speed cushions, and really solely speed cushions, and for a couple of reasons. One is they're very known to us, meaning we know how people are going to react to them. We know the product that we're going to get. These are made out of recycled rubber in a factory, and so when we order a 6 foot wide by 10.5 foot cushion, we get a 6 foot wide and 10.5 foot cushion. We know exactly how that's going to perform, how to put it down, all of those kind of things. They hold up really well. We're having really good results in terms of durability. We've got some of these that have been out 10 and 12 years, and they still look good, in really good shape, and doing their job well. They're modular, which we like. If we do check things like paving schedules, but we really wouldn't even have to, because one nice part about these is we can put them down this year, and if it gets paved in 2 years, we just unbolt them and pave the street. We can put them right back down. We're not out anything. These are not site-built speed cushions like you may have seen on other roads, and even like Metro has done in years past. They're only about three inches tall, and that doesn't sound like very much. It's not, but it's good enough to do its job. They are 6 feet wide, meaning a normal car cannot straddle these. They look like, you could just drive right over them, but that's just wide enough that even, fairly large full-size trucks and all are going to have to put at least 2 wheels on them. But at the same time, the reason they have those brakes in them, and they are only 6 feet wide, is that some of the largest vehicles, which are doing very important work, like our emergency responders, can straddle them a little easier. Even they are not totally immune to these, but they're not as impacted nearly as much as if it were one continuous piece of rubber all the way across the road. So ambulances, fire trucks, and those kinds of things very much our partners in transportation safety, and they're very much a fan of what we're doing here with this product. We can manipulate a couple of things in the design, and you see some examples of that here. On the upper left-hand pictures, you see two speed cushions side by side on a two-lane road. That works fine for some streets. Other streets are a little wider, like the picture on the upper right, and we need three, and we may need more than that. It all just depends on the width of the road, with the objective being we never want to give a car the ability to drive around these. We never want them spaced so far apart that you can drive through or can drive around. And so we're really conscientious about that, just to make sure that the full width of the road has something. And so sometimes we'll use the signage that you see in the upper right hand picture there. Nobody wants to drive around a speed cushion, even though if that sign weren't there, there may be enough room for somebody to do that. And our experience is, if we give someone enough room, even if it means leaving the road, there are some people who will drive around them on the shoulder or in a yard or something like that. And so we've learned you got to really protect those edges. Same way with the little white delineators down in the bottom right hand picture. The point there just being protect those edges, make sure it doesn't even appear that you could drive around without running over something. And so all of those aspects are some of our design tools. We can also vary the length of them. So the bottom left-hand picture is showing you the length of the speed cushion. They come in three standard widths or standard lengths: 7 feet, 10.5, and 14, with the shorter ones being the more aggressive ones. So those 7-foot cushions, we have begun to reserve those in some of our most urban neighborhoods, and the 14-foot cushions, similarly, we reserve for some of our more rural locations. Our default now is 10.5, and I would expect we would use that on the Wingate project. But we do have that design sort of flexibility as well. Close cousin to the speed cushion that you may still see some, and you see in real special applications, is a speed table, made by the same company, made out of the same material. It's just a different configuration, and it performs a little differently. It is longer, like we were talking about, 10.5 or 14 feet. These can go up to 21 feet, and so they just come in a different configuration. You might see some of these in parks, for instance, have started using more speed tables. But again, places where that emergency vehicle response is not as critical as it is on some of our typical right-of-way in residential areas. So we don't use these very often, but in some cases it is warranted. We do have some before and after data. I think most people who have driven across these, it kind of stands to reason that, yeah, I see why people go slow. And I believe that probably is on average, but our data is showing somewhere between a 9 and 12 mile an hour speed reduction on average. But again, that's for the average car on an average street, and every street's a little different. It depends on how they're spaced and the types of vehicles that are using it, and just a lot of things can go into that. But we feel very confident that there will be we'll be able to achieve speeds in that 20, 25 mile an hour range over the length of the street with these projects. Another tool that we have available to us kind of falls more in that educational category, and that's the radar feedback sign. These are also things you've probably seen around some places, and it does what it says it does. It gives you feedback on the speed that you're going. So it's just a good reminder of what the speed limit is, and if you happen to be going over that, it will remind you of that as well. And we really use these in two different areas. One is if we're trying to do somewhat of a traffic calming response on a street that either has that otherwise falls outside the parameters of our traffic calming program, and that is streets that have either over 5,000 cars a day, like we mentioned, just a very high traffic volume, or have a posted speed limit that's 35 miles an hour or greater. Any of those types of things, we might use feedback signs. The other aspect that we will use these is sometimes we might have a traditional traffic calming project with speed cushions, let's say, but there's a stretch of the road where that doesn't work. We might supplement that with a radar feedback sign instead. And where a speed cushion might not work would be a case like a steep hill. We don't put them on the sides of hills. It might be a real sharp turn in the road. And again, we like for traffic to be going kind of straight on when they encounter a speed cushion. Some projects, and yours might get into this, we'll talk about this, have just one driveway after the next. And we don't want to block someone's driveway with a speed cushion. And some neighborhoods, as you'll probably know, are just very dense. There's just a lot of driveways. And so we might have to kind of hold off on the speed cushion and use a feedback sign instead if we got a real particularly heavy stretch of driveways. Those types of things warrant the use of a feedback sign. Sometimes we will do some pavement markings. We know that when a driver feels like the road is very wide and they got great sight distance, you can see everything, that might encourage higher speeds. And sometimes we can challenge that a little bit by visually narrowing the street. And so if we make it look like the lanes are a little narrower than what they are, then that might help things. But like in this case, we have to be careful by adding that double solid yellow center line. Sometimes that might give the indication that it is a more major street than it is, and it's okay to drive faster. It's kind of intended for that. And so pavement markings can go one of two ways, and so we do that judiciously and when the conditions call for it. In more of our urban neighborhoods, we've got a couple of tools shown here: bulb outs on the left and chicanes on the right. And the bulb outs particularly are kind of an intersection type of a treatment where we are again trying to narrow the throat width of that intersecting street, slow traffic down as it's entering our traffic calming street. Again, we do that with paint and with the plastic delineators as well. But you got to have a lot of pavement to do that and make that warranted there. The chicanes on the right are very specialized treatment. There's only 2 or 3 streets, I think, in all of Davidson County that have this, and they go back a few years. We haven't done any of this very recently. But it kind of creates an artificial meandering of the street back and forth. It works okay if you've got some on-street parking and things. Otherwise, people just kind of take a straight shot through there a lot of times. So we'll sometimes partner a chicane with speed cushions or some other treatment. And lastly, traffic circles. And this is one that we have done in some neighborhoods. I can't think of any that are very close to Wingate. Some more over in the Haywood Lane area might be some of the closest we've done in the past couple of years. But currently, NDOT is not doing a lot of these. They're kind of evaluating the ones that have been out. And this gets into, like we mentioned, whereas speed cushions, we feel comfortable. We know how drivers interact with them. Traffic circles are a case where it's kind of hard to predict. Some people drive in front of them. Some people drive all the way around them. School buses can have real issues trying to turn and navigate an intersection with these. And so there can be some unintended consequences with traffic circles. But it's a good tool, it has its place, especially if you have some very large intersections in a traffic calming project. That brings us to our plans for Wingate. This is very early. It's a very preliminary concept, but we like to show you this and hopefully get some feedback from you on it. Like almost all of our projects now, it's a pretty basic run of speed cushions planned for the street. And I'll tell you a little bit how we lay these out and why you're looking at 6 sets of speed cushions. Let me orient you just a little bit here. So north is to the right. Just helps us get a little more footage on the page. Antioch Pike is that street running north-south. On the left-hand side of your screen, you see the stop sign there. And then coming on to the right, you see the 2 stop signs at Morton, just indicating that Wingate Avenue itself has to stop at Morton. It's the only always stop in the middle of our project. And then continuing on again to the right, you get to Thompson Lane at the end of our project. And again, Wingate stops there. So the way we lay these out is we look at those distances. That distance between the stop sign on NDOT Pike and the stop sign at Morton, and that distance is about 1,600 feet. And then again, from Morton to Thompson Lane, and that distance is about just under 1,500 feet. We take those distances and then we divide those by the spacing that we like to see for our speed cushions. And that is usually on the order of somewhere around 300 to 500 feet. Sometimes it's a little more, sometimes it's a little less, but when we know if we can be in that neighborhood of about 400 feet, that's going to give us a good consistent speed all the way down the street. It's not so close together that it's just obnoxious and it's gonna drive you all crazy and push traffic potentially to another street, but it's not so far apart that you feel good about, going over a set of speed cushions and then stepping on the gas and getting down the road just to encounter the next set of speed cushions. It's close enough. You see the next one coming as you're going over the current one, and so you really we don't see a lot of speeding up in between those. So we're looking for that spacing about 400 feet. We get that here. We get both of those. The section from Antioch to Morton is a little bit further apart. It's right at 400 feet. From Morton to Thompson, it just works out that it's a little bit closer together at about 365 feet. So either case, I think it's going to give a good result. That also doesn't have to be exact. You see a little bit of a spacing difference, in the area of Thus and Sunrise versus the last one there at Morton. You're not going to notice the difference as you drive that. We're really comfortable with that spacing. That comes because while we may lay that spacing out just so, when it comes to the real world and we get down on the street and start trying to lay those in, we're looking at a couple of things. First of all, that presence of those intersections. We're obviously not going to put a set of speed cushions in the middle of an intersection, so that's going to require us to move it one side or the other. Already mentioned driveways. We're gonna watch that, and driveways is going to be a case here on Wingate that I feel pretty sure about, or I feel pretty good about these locations that we can get 3 sets of speed cushions in on each of these 2 segments. But until we get out on the street and really lay those in and make sure we're not too close to someone's driveway, we just ask for a little leeway on that. And by too close, our policy is we don't want anything closer than 15 feet from somebody's driveway. We try to get more than that. We try to get as far away as we can, but you can't always do that in some of our more dense areas. We also are watching for hills and curves, as I mentioned. I know you don't have any curves. You can see that on this map. Hills, I think there's a little bit. I think Morton is kind of down in a low area, so we'll just have to look at that grade leading to that. I think we'll be okay. I don't think it's a very steep grade there, but we'll be paying attention to that. And then lastly, you see the little picture down there at the bottom where it says 2 cushions, just indicating that's about what your project, that's how it will look visually to you. We will see those 2 cushions side by side. Because at a 22-foot road width, it doesn't warrant anything more than that. It would just kind of push traffic to the edge of the road. That will certainly be adequate to keep people from or require people to drive over the speed cushions and slow them down. I've done nothing but talk since we got started, and this is a great point that if you want to come off mute and tell me anything about the street or your reaction to this plan. Is it what you hope to see? Is it not what you were wanting to see? Any of that type of comment would be welcome at this point.
I think it looks great. I do have a question about the section of Wingate between Morton and Antioch Pike. There's a lot of steep kind of drop-offs there. And if someone is attempting to to bypass a speed cushion, would there be other barriers, kind of like the white post you mentioned before? You know, something to warn these people that if they do attempt to go around it, they may end up in a ditch.
Yeah. I, I don't want to oversell that. I mean, we've seen it, but we see it where, there's almost no change between the road elevation and the yard. And so people will just kind of drive around it. Or in a lot of cases, there's a 2 foot wide gravel shoulder. People will treat that like a road. We haven't seen people like literally driving off the side of the road and crashing into a tree or a ditch, in an attempt to avoid these. So I don't mean to oversell that. I do mean though to say that we will do what we need to protect that. If it's a ditch and
Yeah.
it's a you can see it, it's there, it's 2 feet below the side of the road. We're not too
Just know
concerned about that.
yeah. As a pedestrian walking through there, when there's a car speeding and not paying attention to you, it's a noticeable drop off. So that's why I
Yeah.
think about that, because, even when you're walking, it's scary enough. But yeah, that's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And then the other tool, while at 22 feet, that's probably not enough room to put two cushions and one of those plastic delineators. I don't think we'll need that. One tool that we've used more and more, and especially here where we have a lot of intersecting streets, is we will be putting those big steel sign assemblies that we saw in one of those pictures. Those we can put right at the location of the speed cushion itself, and that's a pretty good deterrent that no one's going to purposefully drive off and drive through one of those things. So that can be another way to make sure both that the speed cushion is visible and that it's kind of protecting the edge of that. It's a good point about pedestrians. We hear that a lot. The other good thing about 22 feet, like on your road, that's still kind of like on this little picture here. It's still going to give a nice walkable area on the side of the road. If people are pushing strollers or things like that, it's really not going to come into much conflict with that.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions about that?
No, this looks good.
What
Great.
is the anticipated timeline of the project?
Good question. We'll move on. We'll come back to this if we need to, but that is a good segue into next slide, which is a little bit about the process here. So we're here at this red circle. This little diagram's probably overly complicated, but it's pretty simple. We're at the red circle, the neighborhood meeting. After tonight, we think in concept that plan looks good, we'll move ahead into the design of that. We've got 2 months here. We don't need that long, especially for a pretty straightforward project like this. So in the next few weeks, we will nail down that design work, and then we've got a little choice to make. And this is something we put back to you all, and it's gets specifically to your question about time frame. If what you see there is pretty good and you say, yep, it's 6 sets of speed cushions, it's not rocket science, that's what I expected, let's go with it. We'll go ahead and do the design work, and we don't have to come back to a second meeting. We used to do a mandatory second meeting, and we found that on a project, a lot of our projects, we'd get back and it was kind of the same thing we did at the first meeting. We didn't give a lot of new information. People were pretty, they understood it the first time, and we just came back with a little more detail the second time. We've made that optional now. So in an attempt to streamline, because we got so many of these neighborhoods we're working on, we don't have to come back and do a second meeting. If you all are okay with it, we'll go to the design and then we'll go straight into the ballot, and I'll define that in a minute. But to the question of how much time, the ballot is a 6-week process that we leave that open. Assuming it passes, that's when then the real time delay starts. Unfortunately, there's a material ordering process. Metro does not stock these speed cushions, so we got to get the material, and then it enters the contractor's construction queue. So all that to say, from the time the ballot passes to construction, it's a minimum right now. This could change. They're working on it, but it's going to be a minimum of a year. And so we like to tell you that just so you don't think, by Easter you're going to see speed cushions out here. It's not that quick, unfortunately. So the short answer is a minimum year, but really add another month or so for that. Y'all be thinking about if you want to do another meeting, we're happy to do it. But the design process, let me step back to our slide just a minute. So I know what I'm showing you here is pretty, there's not a lot of detail there. You can tell it's 6 sets and you can tell roughly where we're thinking. That may be plenty of detail for you. So for some neighborhoods it is. Some people like to say, no, I'd really like to see exactly where we're going. So what we will be doing in the design process is we'll come out and we'll actually do plans that show exactly where each of these sets go, and it'll say something to the effect of, a set of speed cushions will be going 62 feet north of the driveway at 123 Wingate Avenue, just to throw out a hypothetical. It'll be kind of that level of detail. So it'll be about what you're seeing here, but we'll just have a little more detail. That's really all the design plans will show you. And then it'll tell the contractor exactly how we want them to, be situated on the street and so forth. But for a lot of people, this is a little more understandable. So we like showing kind of more of a basic sketch. I'll talk a little bit about the ballot process. This is an important part of all of our traffic calming projects. So we've got meetings like tonight where we've advertised it. Our main objective is just to make sure everyone has as much information about the project as we can give them. And the online ballot is part of that too. We know traffic calmings, these speed cushions are things. I mean, they're effective. We know they are, but we know they're not for every neighborhood too. And so we give everybody the opportunity to weigh in on that. And so what we will do is when it comes time to ballot it, we will send out cards. Maybe you got a card for tonight's meeting. It'll look a lot like that. And it basically just has a QR code and takes you to a web page where you can put in your name and address and just vote. Do you want this or not? And that stays open for 6 weeks. And at the end of that 6 weeks, we look at all of the responses, all the people that have voted, and we just tally them. And if 2/3 of the responses were in favor of the project, we'll move that forward. And so that's how the voting works. It's been a pretty good system. NDOT does make all of the past voting results available. So if you're interested in how often these pass or fail or whatever, you can go see that. I can tell you the vast majority, once they get to this point, are passing, but some do fail. There's no guarantee there. A little more information about who's eligible to vote is here. This is just a snapshot from the little mailing list tool that we use from Metro Planning. This is just the section from Antioch to Morton, so roughly half the project. And so what we do is any property owner whose property abuts the right of way of the project that we're working on is eligible to vote. Now it's got to be an improved piece of property. It can't be a vacant lot, can't be a business or anything like that. But we do let churches vote. I think you may have one. It seemed like the church maybe on the corner at Thompson may have sold. I'm not sure exactly the status of that, but in any case, we do ballot churches, schools, and those types of things. But for the most part, this is a residential neighborhood, and so each of these properties will get a chance to vote. And note that I did say it is the owner. So if any of these are rental properties, then the ballot will be going to the owner's address on file, wherever that may be. If you own more than one property, you still only get one card. We restrict everybody to one vote per owner, and it is one vote per household as well. I think that's it. No businesses, things like that. Any questions about the voting process? what happens is we will, once we get done with the design plans, we will post those online. And then once that card comes in, this card takes you not only to the place where you can vote, but it also is a link to those design plans. So you can get on there and you can zoom in, you can see exactly what's being proposed, where those speed cushions would go and all of that kind of stuff. So you have the opportunity to see that at the same time you're making your vote. So we want everybody to have as much information as they can when they vote. That's my contact information. I'm Jeff. I'm the one in green at the bottom. The email address on the top, Nashville TrafficCalming.Nashville.gov, is sounds like a generic email address, but it really is the best way to contact the Metro folks involved in this. Multiple folks get in and have access to that email account. So that's why it's kind of a generic one. But feel free to contact it or myself or both of us if you have any other questions or concerns or need clarification or think of anything as we go through this process. I'll put that back up, but just to show you, that's the QR code to access the traffic calming website. If you've not been there, it's got a lot of resources, some of which we mentioned here tonight, some didn't, but feel free to avail yourself of that. Any other questions, comments? You guys have been easy.
How often do projects get downvoted, or the street decides they don't want it?
Like I said, it's on there, but I'm gonna hazard a guess that 90+% pass. Probably way more than that. Usually in doing these meetings, we get a pretty good sense of the neighborhood's position on it. You can kind of tell if there's a lot of concern usually on these meetings. So for whatever that's worth, but yeah, it's way heavy in favor of it passing.
Thank you.
But we always encourage that part used to be done by a door-to-door petition. We required the applicant to actually go door to door, and it wasn't 2/3 of the people who voted. You actually had to have 70% of everybody who lived on the street. And you can imagine how difficult that was to round up everybody's stance on this. And but the good part about that was it kind of required a conversation. You had to go talk to your neighbors. We still encourage that. We'd love for if this gets you and your neighbors to talk to each other, wonderful. Hope it's in a civil way. But I say that to say, feel free to reach out to your neighbors, give them this information, send these links out. If you need us to provide you anything to do that, we're happy to do it. So feel free to make your case, and if you're for it, go out and encourage people to vote for it. If you're against it, go out and encourage people to vote against it. I don't care. This is your street, it's your project, and Metro is here kind of at your service to help you with this. But we just want people to know about it, and and come together to think about the safety of their street and how we can improve that. Any other final thoughts? I don't want to keep you. This is the first above freezing weather you got. You guys may go for a walk in the balmy 40-degree temperatures out there. I don't know.
How do we stay up to date on the project?
Well, if we're deciding if you don't think another meeting is necessary, and we're always happy to just move this forward and not do another meeting.
Yeah, the plan looks good to me.
Yeah, that's kind of the sense that I get. Then the way we will do it is you won't hear a lot from us until we post the design plans and move forward with the ballot cards. we normally will just reach out to the council member and the applicant and let them know that, hey, the ballots, the plans are being posted and the ballots are going to be out, within the next week. So tell your neighbors, they're coming, but really a lot of people probably won't hear anything until that postcard shows up in the mail. And we try to do it so that, when they get that postcard, that with a combination of resources on the website, if someone has never heard anything about all this and they get that postcard asking them to vote, we want to make it so that they can get in there and kind of educate themselves if that's what they choose to do. So that's really the next thing you would hear from us, most likely.
Okay. So we'd potentially get a ballot in about 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, I would say 2 months on the outside, hopefully closer than that.
Okay. Cool.
Well, that's great. Well, again, this meeting's been recorded, and so you can check back at that website. There's a little place that says "Watch a Traffic Calming Meeting," and this will be available to you. Feel free to spread that around and get back to us again if there's anything you think of, you think we should know. But otherwise, we'll be working on the design plans and look forward to getting those posted, moving this into the ballot.
Well, thanks for educating us.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank y'all for attending tonight and for your interest in the project, and look forward to working with you on it.
Sounds great. Bye.
All right, y'all have a good night. Goodbye.
You got